Hey guys, this is Andy. I'm so glad that you can join me again. Today I wanted to talk about white privilege and the truths behind it and also the dangers behind it. So I wanted to talk about white privilege, and I wanted to first talk about the truths, and then I wanted to talk about the dangers. Now, before I go into that, I want to remind you of something, right? I want to put something in your head before we go into this. Remember that every good lie, right? And I'm not saying white privileges are a lie. I actually believe in certain white privileges, okay? And we're going to get into this. Remember, every good lie is mixed in with truth, right? Satan masquerades as an angel of light, although he is a very dark individual, right? Well, why does he do this? If it was like the movies and you saw some demon running at you with a pitchfork and like flames coming out of his horns, that really wouldn't, you would run away, right? You wouldn't be like, oh, look, he loves me. You wouldn't do that. You would run away from it, right? So Satan he's smart enough to know this, right? So I want you to think about this. There's generally two sort of camps when it comes to white privilege, okay? I fit in this camp, and I think most people do. Sort of over here, there's a radical left organizations that fit into this camp, and I'm going to tell you how this happens. So, the first camp, this one's pretty easy, and I'm pretty sure 99% of you all will agree with me. There are privileges that everybody has, whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're Asian, whether you're Hispanic. It just depends on the context. It depends on where you are. So let me give you an example. I'm Korean, right? If you're Korean and you go into a Korean restaurant, right, and you order in Korean and you're very nice to the waitress, you will probably get what Koreans know as service, right, which is free food. When I went with my white friend and he's looking at the menu and he started ordering, like, can I get some bulgogi and galbi, please? That's not going to help him. He's not privileged. He's totally not privileged. He is totally disadvantaged, right? So I was like, hey, man, like, I'll order, okay? I'll order for us, right? He had no privileges there. I had a lot of privileges there. Let me give you another one. For Black Americans, right? You can say whatever you want to this particular example. You say whatever you want, okay? When you're out at the playground and you're playing basketball, right? And let's say there's 9 Asian kids and there's 1 black kid. Who do you think is going to get first pick? Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Don't you lie to me. You and I both know that the black kid is for sure going to get first or maybe second pick. At the lowest, it's going to be third pick. Don't you lie to me, my friend, right? That would be something that a black person has privilege in, right? And there's a lot of other things. You can even think about like the hip hop industry. Black people would definitely have privileges if you want to be a rapper. But a white rapper, how many successful white rappers are there? They're growing now. They're certainly growing, right? There's more of them, but it's just not the same thing. Now, the last thing that I want to say is for a white person. I was once in Des Moines, Iowa, and my friend was driving me around, and we were in like the farm area. We were away from the city, and I really needed to go to the bathroom. Right now, I'm not totally unaware of where I am, so I understand that it's all white people here. So I was like, "Hey, you need to pull over." He's like, "Dude, we should go back home because it's all white people here. I don't know if you really want to go to one of these like gas stations or like the cafe." And I was like, no, there's a cafe right there. I need to go right now. If you don't pull over, I will go in your car. Pick. And he's like, all right, we'll go, right? He's like, just warning you, man. Like, I don't know how people are going to take to this. I was like, it's okay. I don't care. So I went in there, and lo and behold, right, the moment I walk in, everyone, the bell rings, whatever, and everyone turned and looked at me, and they're like, right? Like, this was literally the reaction. And I expected it, and I was like, is someone going to say something? I don't know. I just need to go to the bathroom. I hope this doesn't happen. And I remember thinking to myself in my head, I kind of wish I was white, like, for the next 15 minutes. I wish this happened because I just wanted to go to the bathroom, right? Now, there's these sort of small privileges that I think all of us can agree with, that we have certain privileges, right? However, there's another group that's sort of weaponizing this idea of white privilege, where what they believe is that white privilege is, they're getting into class guilt or group guilt or collective guilt, right? You are all guilty of this illicit privilege of being white, okay? Does that make sense? So in other words, if you're a white person, you have become the benefactor of an immoral system that benefits you and hurts others because you're white as opposed to this black person, right? And we're going to get more into the examples of that, right? But that's sort of the argument over here. Now, not everybody thinks like this. This is more of a Marxian attitude where they're like, hey, you guys are all white privilege, you guys are all guilty, and you guys are bad. Now, let me just make this very clear. I want to get us out of this thinking of always thinking about race all the time, right? America is just so racist. It's even just racist today. Everyone just thinks about race all the time, of skin color and all this stuff. I want to make a very important point here. Just because you look a certain way doesn't make you a certain way, okay? So, if you're Australian, are you the same as Germans? If you're Irish, are you the same as the English? If you're the French, are you the same as pale-faced Spanish? Are you? You're not, right? Are Russians the same as Canadians? Have you ever been to Mississippi or Louisiana? I have, okay? A white person in Louisiana is very different from a white person from New York. It's worlds apart. A white person from Mississippi is really different from a white person living in San Francisco. Okay? They're just totally different. They're not all the same. Don't think that they're all the same. All white people are the same. This is completely incorrect. Not all black people are the same. Not all Asian people are the same. If you think that Asian people are good at numbers and they're smart, right? Let me tell you something right now. As an Asian person, let me tell you something, okay? Look me in the eye. Check it out. There are some Asian people in this world that are as dumb as rocks, okay? If you think that just because they're Asian, you think that they're smart and you start believing everything they say, good luck to you. Because I don't know where you're going to go with life. I hope he's not making any like really big life decisions for you, okay? Just because you're Asian doesn't mean that you're smart, all right? Now, this idea that not every group is the same, right? This is a very important thing. This is a very important thing for us to understand, because when it comes to white privilege, a lot of people will say something like this. White privilege exists because white people make more money than black people, right? Now, if I weren't to look deeper than that shallow, on the surface observation, then I might believe you, because like, oh, look at the median income disparity, right? And that's true. However, I want you to always look underneath the shallow observations, right? I always want you to think that, because if I can say that all white people make more money than all black people, this is completely ridiculous. In fact, let me give you some statistics here, okay? That a lot of people, certainly a lot of people in the media don't want you to know, because it would go against their narrative and they're trying to win your vote and they're trying to win your money. Ghanaian Americans, people from Ghana, which is an African country, okay? People from Ghana, right? Understand that every country has their own culture, every country has their own values, their beliefs, and within the country there are differing individuals with different values and beliefs and systems, right? Look at America. There's Christians, there's Jews, there's Catholics, there's atheists, there's Muslims, there's all kinds of people, right? There's Buddhists, etc., Hindus, all that stuff, right? Don't just classify one country and therefore they must all be the same. This is really, really ignorant. So don't be an ignorant person, okay? So Ghanaian Americans, people from Ghana who are black, they're not the same as people from Algeria, okay? Just want you to know. Don't paint all black people in the same way. Ghanaian Americans make more money, have a higher median income than Cajun Americans. Cajuns are from Louisiana, right? Cajun food, you know, like crawfish boils and jambalaya. I love Cajun food, by the way. You know, I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and you guys by far make the best oysters, in my opinion. So anyways, Ghanaian Americans who are black make more money than Cajun Americans who are white. Okay, let me give you another one. Egyptian Americans from Egypt, who are black, Egyptian Americans, make more money than French Americans, people from France, right? Or who had descendants that immigrated over here from France. Egyptians make more money, right? They're black. They're making more money than the whites. Where is the privilege, right? Here's another one. There's a lot more. I'm only going to give you three. Nigerian Americans, I happen to know a lot of Nigerians for whatever reason. Nigerian Americans make more money than English Americans, people from England that came over here to America. Nigerians make more money than them. Black Nigerians make more money than white English Americans, right? My point to you is that don't always think of race all the time. I'm trying to get you out of this thinking of race, race, race. Everything's race. No, it's not. There's a lot of culture, there's values, there's systems, there's beliefs, there's ideologies, there's morals, there's character. These are all very important things. I don't want you to judge people by a skin color, but I want you to look at a person's character, right? What Martin Luther King Jr. famously said. That's what I want you to do. Don't paint these broad brushes over people. All black people must be a certain way. No, all black people are poor. No, they're not. I just showed you 3 groups that make more money than white people. Okay? Australian Americans make a lot of money. They make more. Asians are doing so well. Australian Americans make more money than Korean Americans and Japanese Americans. They do. They make more money than Chinese Americans. They have a higher median income. This is my point to you, right? If we start painting these broad pictures, we're really going to get lost, and I'm going to become racist. All the while militating against racism, I actually have become the racist, right? This is something that I don't want you to fall into. Okay, I want to give you 3 very popular things that people talk about today. They talk about the 1960s, right? The Civil Rights Act and all that stuff, Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King. They talk about slavery, and they talk about the Native Americans that were displaced and murdered and all that stuff. People say that America was racist, right? And in some ways you could kind of argue that, but understand that not all Americans were like this. Let's go to the 60s. Do you know who voted for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act? Who voted for it? There were people who were against it. All the people who were against it were primarily from the Democratic Party, and they were white. So you can be like, oh yeah, look, white America was racist. No, there were actually a lot of white Americans who voted for it. That's why it went through, right? And you can't even say that all the Democrats were like this, because Lyndon Johnson was the president. He was racist, and if you read his diary and his journals and all that stuff, he said the N-word a lot. Okay, I get all that. The only point that I'm trying to make to you right now is that not all white Americans were racist during that time. Let me go back to slavery now. During slavery, someone might say, yeah, like America owned slaves. Well, did all of America own slaves, right? Most of you know, if you remember any U.S. history, you remember that it was generally the South, right? And the Southerners owned slaves. But how many Southerners actually owned slaves? If you look at history, then you will know on the low end, depending on the year and depending on when you're looking at, right? It was about 20 to 25%. On the high end, it was about 30 to 35% of Southerners, okay? So the Southerners owned slaves, but not even all the Southerners owned slaves. So for me to say America owned slaves is completely untrue. In fact, the minority of America owned slaves, and there were a lot of people from the North who were against slavery. Now, here's the last one, Native Americans. This idea that America killed the native peoples here because of manifest destiny. Now, if I say that to you, this sounds very kind of convincing, but this is actually not the case. It wasn't, let me put it like this. If you and I had a DeLorean, right? Okay, for those of you young, Back to the Future, right? And we had a time machine. And we went all the way back there. We went back to Andrew Jackson's time as president. If you look at manifest destiny, it wasn't all of America that wanted to do this. The mass displacement of Native Americans, the mass enslavement of Native Americans, and the mass murder of Native Americans. This actually happened. It was actually Andrew Jackson and the Democratic Party at the time. I'm not saying Democrats are racist now and they're going to mass murder you. That's not what I'm saying. It was Andrew Jackson and all those white people in the Democratic Party that did this thing. The Republicans, or the Whigs at the time, which is what they were called, which is the Republican Party. They eventually called themselves the Republicans. Prior to being called the Whigs, they called them the National Republican Party. And I think it was the anti-Masonic Party that kind of joined forces against the Democrats. But my point to you is that not all of America wanted this. So whenever you hear people go, America was like this is completely untrue. Not all white people were racist. Not all white people were guilty of using their white skin privilege and oppressing and taking advantage of the black communities. This is just not true. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. And I gave you 3 statistics, and I can certainly give you more, and there's a lot more that you can talk about this, and you can leave some comments down below if you'd like me to address certain things. However, it's just not the case now. There's a lot of black Americans, as I showed you, Nigerians, Egyptians, South Africans, who are primarily black. They make a lot more money than a lot of different other white groups, okay? So, that's the number one thing that I want you to get. I'm only going to make one more point in this video. Number one, Do not judge people and do not make blanket statements over races. That just because you're white, that must mean you are privileged. No, there's some white people who make less money, median income, who have less privileges. It depends on the context. It's not all white people have it better in America than all black people. Let me give you an example, okay? All white people did not have it better than me when I was in high school. You know why? Some of you may have gone to high school that I went to, right? And during the time that we went, right? You remember, okay? Some of you watching probably went to high school with me. You remember. Our high school was 50 to 60% Asian. It was not a privilege to be a white person at that time. It was far more of a privilege to be Asian at that time. All the most popular kids in high school, who do you think they were? They were all Asian kids, right? Why? Because there's so many more Asians here. Do you know who was in all the AP, IB honors classes? It was primarily dominantly Asian. There were not that many white people in there. I honestly only remember one dude in chemistry. Okay, it was almost all of us were Asian, right? Almost all of us, right? I'm not saying everybody was Asian, but it was primarily Asian. This is my point. Don't draw these huge brushes and say everyone is like this and all the white people are privileged. No, they're not. Not all the white people are like this. Not all white people are privileged, okay? Someone born in the ghettos of the swamps of Louisiana is not more privileged just because they're white than Kanye West and Kim Kardashian's kids. They are not. And if you think so, come on. Really? I want to end it with this. Inherited wealth. A lot of people talk about this idea of inherited wealth and redlining. Redlining was a simple, very simple idea, right, back then. And it was basically took a red marker and they drew around certain communities in the country. And they said, we will not give federally backed loans for these homes, right? And they were all black communities, right? And so without getting too into the details of it, pretty much they were not letting black people own homes, right? So there was a popular video called Systemic Racism. And they showed like these cute little figures and they said, okay, a white person and a black person, right? The white person had grandparents and parents who could own homes. And so therefore that money flowed down into the family. And now in 2020, they have, parents gave them a house or they gave them money or they gave them trust funds or whatever it was, right? Over here, a black family who didn't have those things and who were genuinely discriminated against and had like real, authentic, systemic racism happening to them, they couldn't get anything. They couldn't get any wealth, right? How many wealthy African Americans do you know in the 1960s, right? They just didn't. How many now do you know? It's like a lot of them. It just wasn't that way. So now you have black kids who don't have any of that. So now you have these two things, right? You have certain white people, not all white people. I hope I made that clear in the first half of this video. Not all white people benefited from redlining, okay? Especially like imagine if a family immigrated in the 80s. Obviously, they did not benefit from this. My family, right? My parents who immigrated from Korea, they did not benefit from this. They started from nothing. And then my dad and all that and my mom, they had to work their way up to get to this point, right? So they did not benefit from this. However, there are people who did benefit from this, right? There are white families who stayed here generationally and they benefited from these racist, immoral policies. And then there's black people who stayed here who were disadvantaged and they didn't benefit. In fact, they were hurt by these racist policies, right? So what do we do with this, right? Number one, understand something. You as a white person, right? You will never, God is not going to sit you down on the judgment seat one day and say, hey, account for your parents' sins. He's not going to do that. He's not going to say, hey, Andy, you need to account for your granddaddy's sins back in during the Civil War in Korea, right? He murdered a bunch of people and you need to account for it. He's not going to say that to me. My granddaddy is going to be having to give account for his sins. I'm going to have to give an account for my sins. And you're going to have to give an account for your sins. Not your parents, not your grandparents, not your grandparents, yours. You will be held accountable for yourself. This is a very important aspect that you need to get, that you need to grasp. Now, that being said, there's some people, there was a lady actually named Phoebe Kilby, Phoebe, Phoebe, Kilby, Kilby. She had found in, you can Google her too, she had found that her ancestors had owned slaves and she felt really bad about it and she actually wanted to go meet the people that her ancestors owned their ancestors, right? And so she wanted to go meet that and sort of, face it head on and like, okay, I'm gonna do something about this. And so she actually did, and she created a certain type of ministry. I don't agree with everything they do in the ministry, but my point to you is, and you can Google it, and if you like it, go for it, and do your thing. But my point to you is that if you feel that you have been the benefactor of these racist policies of this white privilege, right? Of that you have gained from this. Number one, don't apply it to everybody. Don't apply it to all white people. They didn't all gain from it. They just didn't. There's some white people that have way less money. You're going to tell a white people, you're going to tell the Cajun American who makes less money to give to a Nigerian American who makes more money? Like, what are you going to do? This doesn't make sense. Where's the disparity? The disparity is actually from black to white instead of white to black, right? So I'm just talking to you who have gained, you who are saying that you have gained illicit money, right? Immoral wealth from racist policies, and you feel compelled to give back or make reparations for this thing, for your ancestors' sins, okay? Honestly, go ahead and do it if you want to. Go ahead and do it. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. You could go for it, right? But just don't apply it to everybody else, right? Don't say, the government needs to tax the whole country. That's ridiculous. This is one of the weirdest things about hypocrisy, right? Is that people don't want to be hypocrites, but they become hypocrites. This is what I mean. If you have gained from this white privilege and you have illicit wealth and stolen goods in your possession, right? Why haven't you given it back? Give it back. You're saying that you are in possession of money and wealth that isn't yours or that you got immorally from racism, right? Give it back. Why have you not given it back? Why are you militating? I'm not saying everybody's like this. Why are you militating for me and the rest of the American societies and all of the government and all that to somehow create a social safety net for these said oppressed groups? We did not gain from this. You did. You did. Okay? So before you start telling people, hey, I want you to do this thing, you do it first. Let me give you an example of this, okay? I, as a pastor, if I told a lot of my former students and former congregation members, I would tell them things like, hey, we should all give to, let's say, a prison ministry, okay? Jesus makes it clear that he wants us to go visit prisoners. Let's all give to this thing. And then let's say you came up to me and you said, hey, pastor, you want to give to this prison ministry because this is unjust and we believe God wants us to help prisoners, right? And I said, yeah. And then you said, pastor, how much have you given? And I said, oh, 0. And then you said, are you gonna give anything? And then I said, no, but you should give, right? What would you say to me? You wouldn't be like, oh, wow, I feel so compelled to give now. No, you give it, okay? Don't be a hypocrite. Don't tell other people what to do before you have done it. This is the idea of the Pharisees, right? A lot of Christians know the Pharisees. What was one of the biggest sins of the Pharisees? It was always hypocrisy, right? That you are telling other people to do something that you yourself are not doing and that you yourself are not willing to do, right? So if you're this rich white person and you got all this money because your granddaddy was a big plantation owner and he had all this stuff and now you have all this stuff, right? And you're like, yeah, we should all give it. What do you mean? You give it, okay? Don't be a hypocrite. You give it. Now, I wanted to end this video just really like telling you guys that in this election year, right? If you made it this far in this video, in this election year, you're going to find that there's going to be so much confusion and right and left, I don't care who you are, right and left that are going to try to pull you apart and make you vote a certain way and give money a certain way. Always remember to look at things through the lens of the Bible, to look at things and dig for truth, right? Because they're all salesmen. They're selling you something, right? Dig down deep and find out what they're selling and see if this is real or if it's not, okay? Don't just buy in. Don't swallow everything whole, right? If you have a professor, let's say you went to UC Berkeley, you probably had a lot of leftist professors. So if you hear from a leftist professor that's teaching you all this stuff and he's this Marxian communist, whatever, right? Don't just swallow it whole. What is it? What are you saying to me right now? What is this causing me to do? Let me dig deeper than the surface narrative that you're giving to me. This is a very important thing and very important ideology because you don't want to be guilty of saying all white people are like this because now you are guilty. Now you are guilty of condemning a righteous person when they're not guilty of it, but you're calling them guilty because you call the whole group guilty, right? But there's individuals in there that are not. right? And we talked about this with slavery. We talked about the Native Americans displacement. We talked about this with 1960s Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act. We talked about all this, right? You are being unjust by saying that they're like this. They're not all like that, right? And then it says to be wise as serpents, the Bible says, right? It says to be wise as serpents. So whenever you hear a pitch from a politician, right? There's a good reason why people say politicians are crooks, okay? They're selling you something. So when you hear it and when you read it from an article or a news article or the New York Times or Fox News or ABC or whatever, MSNBC, et cetera, CNN, when you hear it, just go, okay, think about it, right? Dig deeper, pray, ask God for wisdom. James 1, ask him and he's going to give it to you. Don't just start reading the media narrative and go, racism, right? Don't do that. So always look underneath, always look deeper, always look below the surface of what people are telling you and get to the bottom of it, okay? God bless you guys. I love you. Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe. As you guys know, it helps the algorithms on YouTube. If you believe in this content and you really want it to get out there and more people to know it, that'd be awesome. Really appreciate you. And let me know if you'd like me to cover any other topics down in the comments. God bless, and I will see you in the next video.